The teams are out for Chicago. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Ireland v New Zealand. It's on Saturday the 1st of November. It's an 8:10 kickoff. That's here in Ireland. And it's in Soldier Field in Chicago. Repeat of 2016, where Ireland famously beat the All Blacks for the first time. But, I think it's going to be difficult for Ireland to repeat that in this one. Well, repeat a win. Obviously, they can't beat them for the first time again. But yeah, to repeat a win. But we're going to have a look at the two teams. And, two very good teams, honestly. I'm going to start with the All Blacks. So front row is Ethan de Groot, Cody Taylor, and Fletcher Newell. And, I think like that is a really good front row. I think de Groot, really just brings something to that front row. He had a period where he was out injured, and I felt like, the front row set piece especially really suffered because of that. Cody Taylor, just brilliant hooker. We talk about so many good hookers around the world. There are times when he's maybe not up there in that conversation, but he can get his game up there, alongside anyone else in a two-shirt at a test match. And then you got Fletcher Newell just rounding off a real quality front row. Then into the second row, then you got Scott Barrett there. Someone with just a ton of caps, lots of experience, and, just kind of a steady hand, I think, in the pack as well for them. Beside him, you got Fabian Holland. Someone who playing well recently, deserves, his spot there beside Barrett in that second row. And I think they're really going to give, Ireland a big test again, all around the set piece, but also decent work in the loose from the two of those. On to then the back row, you got Simon Parker, who has, had a really good year, and he's in there at 6. And someone who maybe, a lot of Irish fans don't know that much about, but I think they're going to know a lot about him after this weekend's games. Beside him, then Artie Savea, we're kind of used to seeing him maybe with the 8 on his back, but he has been really good playing 7 this season. But Artie Savea, he's one of those players, you can play him almost anywhere on the field, and he's still going to be either your best player or one of your best players. He's just that good. He's just. There's very few rugby players that I think come up to the same standard as him over such a long period of time as well. And he's as always going to be a menace to Ireland, on the defensive side of the ball and attacking as well. He's just got, great carrying ability, silky skills in terms of offloads and things like that as well. And, you just know he's going to make things happen, for his team. So he's, someone that obviously you got to keep an eye on, but he's very hard to actually stop him playing his game. And when he's really on it, he can drag his team, over the line as well for a victory. And then you got, Peter, Lakai there, at 8 as well. So, for, I think a lot of Northern Hemisphere and Irish fans, other than Savea, probably not known too much about the back row here. But again, these are guys who've been performing well this year through Rugby Championship. And, now they're going to kind of almost announce themselves to the Northern Hemisphere, I think, over the next couple of weeks. And we're going to learn just how good these guys are, because they are quality operators. And then, talk about quality operators. Look at the halfbacks. Cam Roigard, such a clever player. Always got that. Watching out for a quick break. He's got the pace to finish off as well. If he takes quick taps and always just looking for what's on, never kind of switches off, and always looking for that, looking for that little chink where the opposition do switch off, and then he's gone. Either he's tapped and gone through a gap, or he's put somebody else through a gap, and suddenly they're in behind you and you're not going to catch them. Ireland have to be very careful of him because he's such a shrewd operator. And then beside him, like Beauden Barrett, got all the skills in the world there at 10. I know, with New Zealand, there's the whole thing with him, Mackenzie, and then, when Richie Mwanga comes back as well, where they're not sure who their 10 is, but it almost doesn't matter because they're all such quality operators. You're not dropping the quality of the team. It's just a case of, in terms of, the coaches, what style they want to play almost, and Beauden Barr, I think, gives you that ability, to kind of sit between two styles. He can run a back line, as good as anyone else, but he's also has that lovely kicking game as well to put his team in the right areas of the field. And, he's a really good operator there. And, if his pack are going well, he's just gonna move them around the field, put them in the right areas, continue to apply the pressure on Ireland. He's another one with an eye for things like crossfield kicks, looking for, the wide defenders, not really paying attention, maybe drifting a little too far inside, and suddenly he's cross kicked and somebody has a stroll in out wide because of it. So again, halfback partnership that I think Ireland have to be very careful of. Then we come to left wing. You got Caleb Clark there. So Caleb Clark, he's one of these players that has just lots of natural skill, and you almost feel like he hasn't really lived up to his potential. And it's scary because he's like an amazing athlete, amazing rugby player, but to think that he could be even better. He was kind of, I think when he was coming through, there were, a big winger with the 11 on his back. There's obviously going to be comparisons to the likes of Jonah Lomu. He hasn't hit that kind of level. And I think in the modern game, it's very hard to hit those kind of levels as well, because everyone has gotten bigger. So just being big and powerful, isn't going to be enough to dominate. But when he's on it, he does dominate. And he's so good at finishing, where you think, you got three players out there, out wide, you're using the touchline as well, and still he'll manage to get the ball down and without being knocked into touch, when he's really on it. And, but there are tendencies for him to maybe switch off a little bit, get caught, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe, if the game isn't coming to him, he doesn't always go looking for the ball as well. So it really depends how much, he's invested in it, and again, it's not how to say it, he's obviously not out there thinking, well, I'm not going to try or whatever. It's just a case of, I think he's one of those players that maybe needs, his teammates talking to him, or even his own internal monologue about kind of, okay, stay switched on. Where are the opportunities? Can I be involved out here? What's happening on the defensive side of the ball, etc. But again, if New Zealand get him the ball, 10, 15 meters out for the line, and he gets it at pace, it's going to be really hard for Ireland to actually stop him getting over the line. You're going to have to see, I know we got Tommy O'Brien playing for Ireland, and he really does throw himself into defence, but he'll have to hit this guy a hell of a hard hit to actually stop him getting over the line as well. So that could be an interesting one of those who actually come together like that. But yeah, quality player. And then into the centres, we've got Geordie Barrett there. Leinster fans got to see just how brilliant this guy is up close last season, and I think a lot of them would have loved for him to stay on. Obviously he can't, he's just on a sabbatical, but I think towards the end of his career, if he was deciding to maybe move on and not be available for the All Blacks anymore, rather than heading over to Japan or somewhere, I think Ireland would love to have him back, and maybe with the view to potentially being a player for the end of his career and transitioning into some kind of coaching role or something like that, because you can see he has a really good rugby brain as well. And then beside him, we got Quinn Tupai, and they make a nice combination in there as well. And like in terms of the options for New Zealand, the centre, obviously they got plenty of players who can go in there. But these two guys together are they're a good combination. Ireland are going to have to again be switched on in defence, especially because when we look at the Ireland team, like we've got a little bit of a surprise on the Irish selection as well. I think a positive surprise, but still got to be absolutely switched on with these two guys, because you've got Jordy Barrett. He can be your hard running centre, your threat running at 12, but also he can be that second playmaker as well. And with Quinn Tupai, with his ability to make those kind of outside breaks as well, those two combining together really could hurt Ireland, especially if they can get to the edge of the Irish defence, because that's always where Ireland seem to be weak, is just defending on the edge, where you're just out there in the tram lines near the near the touch line, and just kind of at the end of that 50-meter out there, where if you can get them and get Barrett maybe putting Quinn Tupai into a bit of space, you draw up the cover, and then he can just make a half break, pop it back inside, because Jordy's going to run that support line after giving that pass, and then either he's going to finish himself or he's going to put somebody else over as well. So I think it's a nice combination in there. And again, like people talking about, the All Blacks aren't as good as they used to be, but I've said it so many times like that. When you're like you're comparing them to teams that were just head and shoulders above any other team that was around at the time that they were at. So if you're dropping down a few steps from there, you still got an absolutely top quality team. There's a lot of teams in the world that even on their absolute best day would love to be at the quality that a so-called poor New Zealand side are at. Like these guys, they would only be poor by New Zealand and maybe South African standards if you were to say that. I don't think they are. I think they're a really good side. And I think, in terms of preparation, etc., I think they're a better team than Ireland at the minute as well. And then, we're coming into then where potentially the tries are going to come from, the scorers. You've got the right wing Leroy Carter there, who has been absolutely on fire. Will be looking to keep that going. He's got, I think, 3 tries in 5 tests, I think, if I'm right on that. And, he's been predicted that he's probably going to at least double that tally, if not more, over, what is a potential Grand Slam tour for New Zealand as well. And, that's another thing to consider, is that these guys are after the Grand Slam, so there's extra motivation for them as well, not just in this game, but on the tour, but obviously in this game, because if they lose this game, then that's the Grand Slam out the window straight away. So, they'll want to keep it alive, and they'll be thinking, okay, if you're a New Zealand fan, I think you're looking at the 4 games that they have for the Grand Slam, right? So, you got Ireland, and then they got Scotland, England, and Wales. And you're almost saying to yourself, well, Scotland, now it may not eventuate, but you're thinking Scotland and Wales will win those. So if we can beat Ireland first up, then we only have to realistically beat England. Now, it could, it can come a cropper. Scotland can beat them for the first time, and make history the way Ireland did in 2016. But still, I think you're thinking in those terms at the moment. So it's a massive game for New Zealand. But then, like look at fullback, Will Jordan. Like, this guy, you look at him in a test match, and I always feel like, they should just write his name down on the list of scores before the game even starts, because he almost always gets a try in a test, and he's that good. And the thing is, people know that he's probably going to score a try, but knowing that he's going to do that and stopping him from doing that is obviously two very different things. So and with him there, and then you've got Carter as well. I think in terms of their transition, I think is better than Ireland. It's certainly something Ireland have to work on, and also just like general counterattacks from long kicks, misplaced kicks, that kind of thing as well. They're going to be very dangerous. So I think a really good side to pick there. And then you look at the bench. Then you've got Takiaho, Williams, Tossie, another guy who's going to kind of introduce himself to the Northern Hemisphere. Josh Lord, we've obviously seen before. Wallace Satiti, is going to give real impact off the bench, I think. Then you got Cortez Ratima, Fainganuku, and Damien McKenzie as well. So there's lots of firepower on the bench for them to bring off as well. And if it's a tight game, you're looking at like at that bench, there's at least 5 guys on that bench who could come on and change a picture if they need it changing, and do something a little bit extra to get them over the line. And the other guys on the bench, I'm sure are capable of doing that as well, especially if they're coming on kind of as a group where they're going to give impact there. So, and they actually call their bench impact, which I suppose, like, what can you say? But it does have impact. They're not lying with that heading there. But a really good quality side. And again, I would say they're favourites. But we're going to have a look at the Ireland team, and one thing I'd say about the teams is they're like, for whatever reason, there's like a million formats for teams, whether it's like at URC level or Champions Cup or Premiership or Top 14 or tests. Every test nations have a different way of bringing out every rugby. Every rugby site or wherever has a different format as well. Like, can we just have a format we can use that has them on? Because I can't use the Irish, the IRFU one, because they do it where they give the forwards and then the backs and the bench all as separate ones. So I'm using the URC one simply because it gives me at least the 1 to 15 and the bench all on one screen, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to be having to flick back and forth between things. But looking at the Irish side, then, so got Andrew Porter there at 1. Porter, I always say about Porter, if the scrum is going well, he's going to have a good game. If he gets pinged for a couple of penalties earlier on, it affects his entire game. Like, he's going to be, not as effective in the carry. He's going to have issues as well at the breakdown. But if the scrum is going well early on, and maybe he wins a penalty, suddenly, like, he's carrying harder, he's a menace at the breakdown, he's winning you penalties, and it's so, like, obviously for any front rower, set piece is impactful on your game, but it seems like for Andrew Porter, it's outsized compared to anyone else. So that's going to be interesting. I think the first couple of scrums, see how it goes, especially for him. And I think that's going to tell you how he's going to go for the rest of the game. Then Dan Sheehan, captaining the side from hooker. We talked about Cody Taylor being one of the best hookers in the world. Dan Sheehan is certainly up there in that conversation. And I think in terms of being a hooker as well, I think he's gotten better over the last season or so, where his line-out throwing has gotten better. He's better in the scrum. But obviously for Sheehan, it's his ability in the loose, the fact that you can stick him out in the wide channels, and he can be a really effective carrier. He's got that kind of, that sense of where his support is. He's got a brilliant offloading game as well. He's got a good step on him. He's not just running into contact, he's trying to avoid contact, and he's getting extra meters out of that as well. And then on top of that, then you have his ability from the back of the maul and also from tap penalties as well to be able to get himself over the line to score tries. And another thing that I've said is that, for Leinster and Ireland, I don't think that either, I think maybe Ireland's maul is a little bit better than Leinster's, but neither, I wouldn't say either of those mauls are really top drawer, top quality mauls. But Dan Sheehan can make an average maul into a good maul just because he has that sense of when he needs to go off the back, and then just that power and explosiveness over a short distance to be able to get over the line as well. So, we might see him doing that in the game if Ireland are going well. Then we've got Tyke Furlong. I think last year certainly dipped. Injuries didn't help. I think he's getting back to his best now, though. We're seeing a bit more of the little touches around the field, that kind of thing, when he's playing with real confidence. I still don't think he's up to his peak that he had before, but the more game time he has under his belt, the better he is getting. Then into the second row, then we've got James Ryan, guy that does all that unseen work in the second row, hits like a million rucks, great at clearing out, and he's one of the keys for Ireland, I think, in this game, to get quick ball, because in the past New Zealand have targeted Ireland at the breakdown, slow down that ball, but I think James Ryan is a really good guy for getting in there and ensuring that the ball is out quickly, and then he'll get up and he'll do it at the next ruck and the next ruck and the next ruck, and people don't notice that he's doing that work. But if he's not there, you will notice it, because Ireland's ball will be slowed over, more potential for turnovers, penalties, etc. And then you've got Tyke Byrne there next to him, come off the back of being absolutely superb in the Test series in the Lions. Before that, he was pretty poor. I think people forget that. And Andy Farrell just, backed him, and he absolutely delivered out the door. He was brilliant. And in that game where Munster gave Leinster an absolute shellacking, he was superb again. And I think if you go back maybe about maybe a year and a half, I think he back to that kind of year and a half back period, and back to that World Cup quarter final against New Zealand, where they absolutely nullified him. I think his form had dropped off after that, but now he's back up at that level. And if Ireland are going to have a chance to win this game, it's going to be people like Tyke Byrne playing at the level that they can reach, winning penalties, disrupting mauls, just being an absolute menace around the field. And then also, giving that extra drive to the maul when they need it, going forward as well. Line outs, disrupting opposition line outs as well. All those kind of things that this guy can absolutely excel at, but he's got to hit, his peak. I think in all of them, if Ireland are going to have a chance. Then the back row, then we have Ryan Bird there, a guy who kind of like Sheehan, where, he kind of come onto the scene as not a typical forward in terms of, the thing that stood out was his carrying ability in the loose, and his kind of athleticism. And he's another one, you could definitely see Ireland with Sheehan maybe wide on one wing and Bird out in the tram lines on the other wing as well. And both of them very happy out there, and being able to carry out there. But, again, like Sheehan, I think his, bread and butter area of his game has improved over the last couple of years. I think he's matured into a far better player than just kind of a show pony type, that maybe he was when he broke into the Leinster team. But now we're seeing all of that. He's another guy who can disrupt lineouts, and he's doing the basics of his job a lot better, I think, than he was a couple of seasons ago as well. So another guy I think that will need to have a big game for Ireland to be able to pull something off here. Then we've got Josh van der Fleer, brilliant link player, and just keeps going. He's massive engine on him, tackles everything around him, and again comes in as that kind of link player, sending other guys through. He like in the last year or two, I would say, like he's improved his carrying game as well. So he's a bit more a threat with ball in hand, but especially I think he's very clever in the way he carries, in that his initial like angles or lines where he's picking and where he's going for certain gaps really do help him to get over the gain line. He's not someone who, is for the most part going to be looking to run over someone. Instead, he's looking for those soft shoulders, getting through that gap, accelerating, and then great awareness to look for who's in support as well. And then another guy beside him in the back row there, you got Jack Conan, who can do that as well. But Conan, whereas Van der Fleer, I'd say, has a bit more of footwork and a step for him. I'm not saying Conan doesn't have it, but Conan has also that ability to carry straight and hard and then look for the offload off it too. So, this back row is going to have to, again, be at their very best, I think, for Ireland. Then into the halfbacks, then we've got James Gibson-Park. Another guy maybe dipped in form a little bit recently, but, if the forwards can give him that quick ball, the way he distributes, gives the backs, and whether it's forwards carrying pods or wherever, just gives them that, extra split second to be able to catch defenses slightly unaligned and find those soft shoulders. So he's another key guy for Ireland. But I think he's also key in terms of communication. I think he's got to be better in terms of, if New Zealand are going after that Ireland breakdown, he's got to be calling guys in and say, listen, you secure this ball faster for me. Like, we can have one less guy in the line if it means we get the ball back, rather than having an extra guy standing out there and being served up slow ball all the time, or the ball getting turned over. So I think certainly communication is going to be key for him. Jack Crowley, absolutely fantastic in that Croke Park game, and there would have been absolute ructions in Ireland, I think, if Prendergast had been picked in front of him, because Crowley has been, I think, for probably the last year, the standout 10 in Ireland, and he's like, this has been coming, he deserves it. And hopefully it's not just a case of, we'll give Jack the start against New Zealand, and then we'll give Prendergast the start against maybe South Africa. Jack Crowley should be the number 10, and Prendergast should absolutely have to fight tooth and nail to rip that off his back. And so hopefully that is what happens. He's the man in possession, and hopefully he delivers the performance we know he can. Then into the backs, then you got James Lowe. He gives that ability of having a left-footed kicker out there on the wing, and just like he's obviously a player that Andy Farrell really likes in his team, and I think Ireland do play better when he's there. He's again kind of similar to, I would say, Caleb Clark, in that the more you see him going looking for work, the better generally he's going to play in the game. Because you have seen, James Lowe, where he might get a sequence where maybe he's dropped the pass, or then like kicked out in the full and done some other stupid thing all in a kind of short space of time, and it kind of affects his confidence. So, like how much he's up for the game, I think is going to affect, because he's another guy, get him close to the line, he's going to finish for you. And also he has that nice ability as well to know where support is and try and find them. And then into the centres, then we got Stuart McCluskey in at 12, massive call, ahead of Bundy Aki and Henshaw as well. And Stuart McCluskey, he's been in great form for Ulster. He's done really well for Ireland when he's gotten chances, but generally the chances he's gotten in the past have been, two of Ringrose, Aki and Henshaw are out injured, and therefore McCluskey gets to play. But this time, all three of those guys are fit and ready, and McCluskey was picked ahead of them. So I think that's a really big call by Andy Farrell, a really big kind of, stamp of approval, as it were, for Stuart McCluskey. And, he's, I think, in terms of bulk, he's, and what I mean, like, it's obviously Aki is a big guy physically, but McCluskey is just has a larger frame. And I think that helps him in terms of carries and getting his hands free for offloads and stuff like that. And I think compared to Aki, I think he has a better awareness of, being able to give those passes as well. Now, sometimes they can be intercepted, which is a bad thing. But I think Aki, at times can kind of just put the head down and he drives forward, and it's great. But then we might have slow ball, guys trying to catch up and then having to recycle it, rather than McCluskey would more than likely be looking for the offload. Not that Aki doesn't do it. I think McCluskey just has a better offloading game, kind of naturally. Then you got Gary Ringrose there at 13. I think a massive game for him as well. Leading that defence and also in attack as well. Being able to, can he kind of unlock that New Zealand defence as well? Again, there's so many players on the Ireland team that are going to have to step up for this, for Ireland to have a chance, I think. Then we got Tommy O'Brien there on the right wing. A guy, who has been exceptional for Leinster over the last year or so, and has really taken his chance. And he's kind of, he's now in there with a start for Ireland. He's got something that, pretty much the entirety of the rest of the Ireland backline doesn't have, and that is proper out and out pace. So to have that threat there, I think is going to give another dimension to the Irish attack as well. And hopefully, with Osborne there at fullback means that in terms of counter-attacking, we're going to see a little bit more from Ireland, from long kicks that are maybe a little bit misplaced and the chase not so good. We might see a little bit from that. And also just an absolute tiger in defence, puts his body on the line. Unfortunately, it's probably going to mean that he's not going to make the full 80 minutes. He's probably going to come off injured at some point because he's thrown himself into a tackle, potentially saving a try or trying to at least save a try and getting himself injured. I can definitely see that scenario happening with him, but hugely brave. And again, part of this thing that we want to see from Ireland, which is that step forward in terms of bringing in new guys into matchday 23s, 4 big games to get them, that experience that they're going to need ahead of the next World Cup. And as I said, Jamie Osborne there at fullback, probably, over the last year or so, certainly in terms of consistency, Leinster's best back. And, with Hugo Keenan out, I think it makes sense to have him there back at 15. And again, combining with O'Brien really could be, and even Lowe on the other wing, could be a real threat on counterattacks, depending on what way Ireland want to play the game, whether they are going to run the ball back or obviously there's going to be a mix of kicking and running, but, just in terms of how willing are they to actually run the ball back? And then onto the bench then, you got Kelleher, you got Paddy McCarthy there, and that's a big one for him, being picked over Boyle. Like people have said, that, other than injury, Paddy McCarthy probably would have come through before Jack Boyle, but, out with a long-term injury, he's, his older brother obviously at the moment is injured as well. Otherwise, the two of them could have been on the pitch at the same time, Joe McCarthy. But, he's one of these players where people feel like he's the future at Loosehead. Now, he came through actually, originally as a tight head and switched sides. But there's a lot of buzz about him. And, he's one of these young guys, no fear, could come on and have a massive impact on the game. And then we got Finlay Bealham there at, covering tight head. And that's an interesting call as well. Because I was wondering, would they go with him or would they go with Clarkson? Because, and maybe because they went with McCarthy, maybe they decided let's not put McCarthy and Clarkson in together in this game. Let's just bring one of the two in. So that's an interesting one there. I think Bealham is a fantastic player as well. And there, for me, a couple of seasons ago, there was a point where Furlong had a dip in form, had getting injuries, etc., where Bealham for me should have been the first choice tight head for Ireland, but I think he's dropped off a little bit from that, and certainly, as talked about earlier, Furlong has come up, but a really good guy to have on the bench. Then we got Ian Henderson there covering the second row. Now, the only thing about Ian Henderson is it feels like the guy is always getting knocks. And that's the worry, is that he comes on and ends up getting a knock on whoever it is, potentially, I guess, James Ryan, or maybe even Ryan Baird if they move Ty Byrne into the back row. But whoever it is that has replaced him might have to come back on for the last kind of 10 minutes or so of the game. But also, he's been a fantastic player for Ireland. And I think that kind of stop-start nature of his career, where it always seemed to be punctuated with these layoffs with injury, that he never really got up to the level that he could have been. I think he could have been a real kind of player for the ages for Ireland. He has done brilliantly for Ireland, but I think we're at the stage now where I would have liked to have seen somebody like Ahern in there instead, and just again with that eye on the next World Cup and bringing players through. Then we got Caelan Doris. People saying Jack Conan as well, but people saying that Caelan Doris hasn't played a minute of rugby this season, and is he going to be ready to come in? But you have to remember as well, look at all the Leinster players in this team, and other than I would say like Osborne, O'Brien, Tyke Furlong, other than them, the rest of them, I think only had one game, and that was where they got beaten by Munster. So it's not like the others had massive amounts of game time in their legs either. And like Tyke Byrne only had one game and is outstanding in it as well. So, and I think someone like Doris, he's one of those players where you can just put him in and he'll go. He doesn't need like to kind of ramp up. So I've no kind of qualms about him coming off the bench. You got Craig Casey there, who has probably been like when you think about Gibson Park dropping off a little bit, probably the Form 9 over the last kind of 6 months of actual rugby in Ireland. Like, so the second half of last season, probably the Form 9, I think, in Ireland at that stage. So again, coming off the bench, brilliant. Sam Prendergast hasn't been in great form. We know he has that ability to run a back line if he gets a platform from his forwards, but it's about, can he do it when he's under massive pressure and things aren't going their way in the forwards as well. And that's a big question mark for him. But hopefully, I think he's in the right place on the bench, and, hopefully the coaches are working with him to work on those areas that he really needs to improve on, and that, this experience can actually make him a better player as well. And then we've got Bundy Aki there on the bench, who, for a period around the World Cup was just game after game after game, like Ireland's player of the match. And that's what he can deliver for you. So having him on the bench as well, I think is brilliant in terms of impact. And there's plenty, again, same as New Zealand, both teams, it feels like, have players who can absolutely come on, and if it's a tight game, who can be the winning of the game for their team. So, if it gets to that point where it is actually that close, these benches are gonna probably decide the game, honestly. So it's nice to see the strength of the two benches as well, that if we're going into that kind of last 20, 15 minutes. But sometimes you're seeing benches sooner than that, like 30 minutes or even like 35 minutes to go. But whenever they're coming on, these guys aren't just on there just to kind of run the game down. I think they're all going to have big impact on how this game goes. But I think for Ireland, Ireland need, I think, around about the 60-minute mark of the game. If they're going to win the game, I think they have to be in the lead by that stage. And then they need to then be able to keep that scoreboard ticking over, just to kind of keep New Zealand maybe at arm's length a little bit, if they can do it. And I think that would be Ireland's route to victory. I don't see, even with a bench this strong, I don't see Ireland being able to, if they're behind with, say, 15 minutes to go, being able to come back over the top of New Zealand and win the game. I've talked about it with the Leinster players, and there's lots of Leinster players in this team, like less of them on the bench, but still, that they don't really have that experience of having to come from behind and win games. A lot of the time they have the game kind of either one or it's the opposition chasing the win, with the 15 minutes to go. And I think that's where Ireland are more comfortable, just because of the number of Leinster players that are actually in the team. I think the Munster players, Ulster, and then, the Connacht players who are going to come off the bench as well, they do have that. But as a collective, because there's so many Leinster players in there, I think that's what the mindset is going to be, is that, being ahead around the 65 minute mark, I think will be a big thing for Ireland if they're actually going to go on to win. But again, if they are ahead at that stage, I think that they're going to have to find at least one more score before the end of the game to actually win the game. Whereas New Zealand are a team that by 60 minutes, they could have the game won. I don't think Ireland would be in that position. I don't think you could see Ireland being more than 2 scores ahead with 60 minutes to go, whereas New Zealand absolutely could see that. And you could maybe see Ireland getting a couple of late scores to maybe make it look a bit closer at the end, if that was the scenario, but not being able to come back and actually get over the top of them and win. So, a lot riding on this, I think, for Ireland in terms of, well, for both teams in terms of momentum going into the rest of November. It's a good Ireland team. Like when we talk about, bringing players through, like there are not many players in terms of ability at test level where you would say, looking at that, let's say just the starting 15, where you say, well, take that guy out and put this other guy in, because he's going to give you an equal performance, but he's someone you can develop for the next World Cup. I don't think we have too many of those guys around at the minute, but still, over this November period, we've got to find them. And some of them could be coming off the bench in this game potentially, or, we're going to see them against Japan, in the game after it. But, it's a hugely exciting game. Again, prediction for the game, I think New Zealand are going to win it. It might be by more than a score as well. But I'm just hoping for a good performance from Ireland and just getting that kind of thing of, okay, there's a platform there to build on. But let me know what you think down in the comments.